Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our session, What We've Learned from Our Lessons Learned meetings. My name is Risa Fickett. I'm the Senior Project Manager in the Enterprise Project Management Office here at San Diego County Office of Education. Presenting with me today are my colleagues, Tyler Petro. He is the supervisor of our Computer Support Services Department, and Win Quach, who is the manager of our application development, our app dev group. So we're going to share with you kind of two sides of this coin of using lessons learned both in traditional projects as well as waterfall projects. Traditional waterfall projects as well as like Scrum and those kinds of projects. So you get to see both sides of that coin. So a little bit of background about lessons learned. So lessons learned session really just focuses on identifying the project success and the project failures and includes recommendations on how to improve future performance on projects. Really, that's what we're doing it. That mindset of continuous improvement. However, it is often human nature to focus on what went wrong rather than what went right. So we also include what we're proud of to give our lessons learned sessions a little bit more of a positive focus and allow project team members to reflect on their efforts rather than just focus on what to fix for next time. So as part of this lessons learned session, we're going to talk a little bit about why. And step one of that is identify the lessons learned. So step one is just literally identifying the lessons learned and those comments and recommendations that could be valuable for future projects. And then we're going to, part two, we're going to document those lessons learned and share those findings. So after we capture those lessons learned, they should be reported to our project stakeholders, and we can create different kinds of reports and based on our audience. So we can take those detailed lessons learned that we captured and any additional input from our participants who aren't able to attend, and then we can distribute those lessons learned to all of our participants and give them time to respond and really prepare a summary for our leadership. So we can provide an overview, summary, the strengths, the weaknesses, as well as our recommendations for the future. And step three, we really want to analyze those lessons learned and make sure that we're organizing them into categories that might make sense. And so the information isn't just information itself, right? It's not just data, but it's actually useful information we can take into the future. Then part four, we really want to store those lessons learned. So again, going back to day one, right, where we said we need to make sure we have a file repository, we want to make sure that we can access those lessons learned for later. And then part five is, again, if we stored them, then that's great. They're sitting like on a shelf somewhere, or in this case, a digital shelf in a SharePoint or a OneDrive or a Google Drive somewhere. We want to retrieve those lessons learned in the future so that we can use them on those future projects. So real quickly in the chat, I'd like you guys to post two adjectives to describe how you feel about lessons learned sessions. Yeah, reflective and energized. Those are great adjectives. What else you got? How do lessons learned sessions make you feel? It could be good or it could be bad, depending on how they've been run and how they've been used. Informative and missing. That's interesting. Great way to improve moving forward. Optimistic and open-minded. Yep, that's a great comment. I'm hoping you guys feel that way after you do a lessons learned, right? Necessary and intimidating. Yes, they can be sometimes. Productive but daunting. Yes. Opportunities and improvements. Yeah, that's a great comment, Jason. Yeah, nervous depending on how the project went. Yes. Yeah, exactly. I see the word growing. I really like that concept of it being used for growth. So it's not meant to be punitive. It's meant to be a growth opportunity. So yeah, all excellent comments, you guys. With that, I am going to hand it over to my colleague, Tyler, who's going to take us through lessons learned at the project level.
All right. Thank you, Risa. Good morning, everyone. As Risa mentioned, I'm Tyler Petro. I am the supervisor of computer support services here at STCOE. I've been here for 6 years, and in that time, I can't even count the number of projects that I have led or even been a part of. But I can say that ever since completing the EPMO project management training, all of my projects are so much more organized and documented than before. And one part of that toolkit that I implemented in my projects is the lessons learned meeting, and that's what I'll be discussing today. So as you can see on the slide, it doesn't have to be all bad. So I say that because, I think of the phrase, did you learn your lesson? This makes me think of being a child and touching the stove or oven when I was told not to. Yes, I learned my lesson not to touch those, but it was a negative experience of burning my hand that led to learning my lesson. So now, as an adult, when reviewing a project during the closure phase, I'm asked, what were our lessons learned? I immediately think to the negative, what did we do wrong that needs to be fixed for the next project? Now, what I learned after going through the project management training is that it focuses as much on the positives as it does on opportunities for improvement. This part of the project focuses on three main questions: what worked well, what can be improved on for next time, and what are you most proud of? This ensures that most of the review and conversations are around the positives of the project that can be carried on to future projects and not just went wrong so that we can fix it. As you'll see also from the last question, what are you most proud of? The lessons learned doesn't just look at the numbers, but it also gathers information that won't appear on spreadsheets or job aids. It asks for the project team to take a deep look and reflection on the work that was done and provide their insight on what really stood out from this project, not just this worked and this didn't. It allows the staff to feel a sense of accomplishment for their contributions to the success of the project. The lessons learned section, it is a large part of the closure of a project. That's true. It's a reflection and wrap up of the current project. But a case can also be made that it's a larger part of the planning phase of your next project. You aren't collecting this information just for it to be archived and never looked at again. It's supposed to influence the planning of your next project. If something worked previously and would apply to your current project, why change it if it's not broken? Increase the success rate of your project by learning from the past. Utilize the parts that went well, plan for the speed bumps that you foresee from what previously did not go well, and put more time into those activities that your staff feels most proud of. As Perry showed yesterday, the success of projects are the number one driver of satisfaction in IT. So it's critical to ensure you're collecting all of the data, quantitative and qualitative, at the end of a project to help guide your future projects. You were also shown a survey that almost 75% of CTOs wish their closure phase went better. That says a lot when the planning and execution phases are usually thought of as the make or break of a successful project. But the closure phase, including the lessons learned, gets insight from all of the project team members, something that isn't seen in high level reports. And as we know, it's always one project to another. So it may be a closure from one project, but it could be a roadmap for your next. Here is an example of our lessons learned from our multi-factor authentication rollout project. The deployment was done in phases, and we had a lessons learned meeting for each phase. The responses came from up to 6 different teams that were all involved in the project, so there were multiple points of view as far as what worked and didn't for the project. This way you can see what may have worked for one team and what may have been an area to work on for another, as the teams had different roles in the support of the project. By going over the information together, especially what the team was proud of, it gives a sense of accomplishment to everyone, individually and as a whole. So you can see some of the responses about how we came together as a division, about the overall success of the project, about the positive impact on the organization, and limiting the negative impact on the staff. But not everything is always peaches and cream when it comes to the responses of some team members. Speaking from my experience, I had a couple of members of my team who were part of the project. And for the first lessons learned after the first phase, they said, I'm not particularly proud of anything. I just did my job. I know what went well and didn't, but for this question, I don't feel any particular way. And it makes sense. In IT, a lot of thinking around is around what is the problem and how do I solve it. We're problem solvers, and our job is to solve these problems as quickly as possible and get our systems or staff back up and running. but we never really dig down deep and look into our emotions and feelings about the work that we do. So I had to work with these team members to think about things differently, asking more probing questions. Do you get joy out of solving problems for people and seeing the satisfaction and gratitude on their face? How did you feel about working with other IT teams that you don't usually work with? Sometimes it takes asking the question in a different way or approaching it in a different fashion. Obviously, we aren't forcing people to be proud of aspects of a project, but we collect this information to help appreciate those that contributed and to help guide future projects. So you want everyone to have a voice and a contribution to the data being collected. In this project, we deployed a new tool to the organization that changed how everyone did their work by introducing a new mechanic that takes additional time to access your email or other applications, but it makes the organization more secure. Being in IT, of course, when you walk that line of security versus convenience, you're going to have staff that are upset that they cannot continue working the way they always have been. So, having done a previous project in which we learned that we didn't send out enough communication to staff beforehand, we used those lessons learned to overcome those possible speed bumps of customer dissatisfaction or staff not adapting to a change in work culture. We now understood that the proper communication must be sent out as to why the project is occurring and what the extra couple of seconds of inconvenience means for the security of the organization, as well as ensuring that we're providing all the necessary resources and training to make them feel comfortable with this new process. So before going through this project management training, I wouldn't have a recap at the end of the project, or if I did, it would be whether the project was successful or not, and that's it. Well, how did I determine the success of a project? Typically on data alone. For instance, this MFA rollout, I'd look at how many users are now using MFA. How many tickets or calls did we receive from staff who had trouble using MFA? What was the ratio of successful logins and authentications versus unsuccessful? These are all answers that you can provide on a pie chart or bar graph and look at and say, okay, this is acceptable and the project was a success. But how can that translate to the next project? Now I'm working on a project about refreshing computers. How does the ratio of logins and authentications relate to me now refreshing laptops and desktops in the environment? That's why the lessons learned is so important. It's not just data, it's asking questions. It's surveying the project members to gain information not found on a dashboard that can be applied to all future projects and analyzed to ensure that the successes can be repeated and the speed bumps can be avoided. At the end of our project, the team was proud that we were able to be part of this initiative, and we were able to guide users in using the tool easily and understand the tool and thus overcome that potential negative response. We were proud to come together as six separate teams under the same umbrella and work together to ensure the success of the project and make such a positive impact on the organization that can be used as a model for other districts to use in their rollout of MFA. So overall, just to recap, the lessons learned, it gives that sense of accomplishment to all of the project team members. It gives that roadmap to be used for all future projects, and it helps mitigate any issues in the future because you learned your lessons now. So with that, I'll pass it along to Win to discuss her experience with the lessons learned part of the EPMO toolkit and how you don't always have to wait until the end of the project to learn your lesson.
Thank you, Tyler. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gwen Quach. I'm a senior manager and leading the application development team here at SDCOE. And today I would like to share with you all on how the application development team leverages the Agile Scrum methodologies to conduct lesson learned at the spring level, and we call it retrospective. So before I go into the detail of the retrospective, I would like to give a brief overview of how Agile Scrum methodology works. So by definition, Scrum is an Agile development methodology used in software development and is based on an iteration and incremental processes. The primary objective of the Scrum is to satisfy the customer's need through an environment of transparency and communications, collective responsibility, and continuous progress. On each of iterations, the development team and the customer meet at the end of each sprint. It's normally about 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the size of the project, and to get the customer feedback on the products that we developed. The reason the application development team adopted these methodologies because we believe that getting feedback regularly from the customers during the development stage helps us to deliver the product just as how the customer wants. So there are 5 different ceremonies in the Scrum. The first one we call the spring planning. This takes place at the beginning of the spring. This meeting is for the Scrum team to analyze and look at the backlog to see how many items, how many amount of work that they can take on for the next sprint. And then the second ceremony is the daily stand-up. Daily stand-up is just about 15 minutes. It's designed for the team to quickly inform everyone in the team what's going on across. Each team member will answer 3 questions. What did I complete yesterday? What will I work on today? Am I being blocked by anything? And then the third one is the spring review. This is basically a demo of what the team has been working on in the last spring to the customers. And retrospective is the fourth one. The Agile is about getting rapid feedback to make the product and the development cultures better. So retrospectives helps this team to understand what worked well and what didn't. Retrospective aren't just a time to complain without actions, like Tyler mentions. We use retrospective to find out what's working so the team can continue to focus on those areas and find out what's not working and use this time to find out what solutions or what actions items that we can do to mitigate that. And then the last one is the backlog refinement. Takes place across the development team. This is for the team to work with the stakeholder to refine the requirements and prioritize the backlogs so that the team can work on. So for today, I'm going to go into more details of the retrospective ceremony. This can be used in any type of projects. It doesn't have to be in software development. So might you wonder, what are the values? You heard Tyler mentions that how values could bring to his project that he was part of. So for us, it's basically helping us to share difficulty and also the future of the team. The retrospective is a discussions meeting. That's including everyone in the team, that includes in the projects as a whole. The team members use this to discuss the process of the product development and the releases. They share the difficulty and the future goals together. And retrospective significantly add they identify problems, look for solutions, and the future goal for the company. It creates transparency. The team can share their experiences, stories, and any complaints, issue regarding various problems, and they can share their opinion themselves as well. And it helps the team to communicate and connect. Through these shared experiences, the team begins to be more communicative and connect with their members. By facilitating communicating through retrospective, the team creates like collaborative group and avoid any future misunderstanding. And then also it's of course continuous improvement. Reviewing the retrospective helps the team fighting problems, suggesting solutions, and finding new opportunity for the team that it can encourage them to use in the future projects. So you might have wondered, how can you start? So I'm going to share with you the 5 steps that you can follow to start doing retrospective if you like. The first step is to set a stage. It is very important to set a stage for the team. This is for the team. This is the time for the team to check in. So it's always start with what we call an icebreaker. This helps the team to feel comfortable to start sharing what they're thinking. You know, when people come to the meeting, like you here today, you probably just got off from another meeting or conversation with your college and thinking about something else. So setting a stage for the team to come and to think about this project is very critical to help the team to be able to focus on what you wish them to do here. And it's also encourage everyone to participate and share their opinion. There's several questions, very simple question you can ask, such as like, what's your favorite game or TV show? What's your favorite dinner dish? Or simply, what's your favorite weather? This ensure that everyone able to participate and answer these questions. The step number 2. So this is when you start gathering the data that you like to share. This one is mostly facilitated by what we call the Scrum Master. They try the team to focus on specific area, as how to improve the product or the process to the last sprint. There's several questions the Scrum Master can ask the team, such as what went well, what did not go well, and what we can improve. And then we go through, every team member would go and answer these questions. When my team used to work in person in the office, we would get together in a room and we use post-it notes and we answer these questions and we post the answer on the board. And then after you gather the data, now it's time for you to look at this data and generate insight to see what is it that you can do to make improvement for the next sprint. So by asking these questions, you group them, you categorize them into what is it that went well, what is it that did not go well, and what we can improve. So we want to get these good notes and good practices, and then we want to keep them moving forward. And then why you want to know what did not go well? By discussing this, what not going well. This helps the team to prevent these issues or challenges in the next spring. The team can also look at each of the issue and challenges and ask why it happened. And one of the technique you could use is asking, 5 why, one after another. That would take you to the root cause of the issues. And that is what you're going after to fix or mitigate in the future when it happens again. After that, you're getting all this data already. You start creating the actions and what is it that you want to do for the next sprint. And also to help the team to, facilitate this in a way so that every team member share the ideas, because our goal is to get all the team members able to talk and share what is it that really they think that could work. Every voice, you want to make sure every voice is heard in these situations. And you have to keep in mind that these are, experimental, and they can change in the next spring if these actions don't work in the following sprint. So the last one is what we call closing the retrospective. This is the time for the team to check out. We want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, and we make sure that all the ideas are being considered and documented. The facilitator would close the meeting by making a summary of what the team discussed, what action item that they came up with. And then last but most important is the celebrations. It is to help the team to feel good about the work and all the decisions that they have made. So these are some of the questions that we use in our team when we do retrospective. You can find a lot more out there on the internet. If you Google for questions being used in a retrospective meeting, there's a lot more. There's some fun one that you can use, but these are the ones that we normally use in our team. And with that, I would like to thank you everyone for attending our sections, and then turn it over to Risa.
Thank you, Wynn. We did kind of have a comment in a chat that I think might be helpful for you to talk about. So I was posting in the chat that you can use components of this. You don't have to be an Agile or Scrum shop to use retrospectives and some of the tools that you've been showing today. And so one of our participants said that they'd like to use Agile, but their team's located at different sites, which makes getting together kind of challenging. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you've been doing essentially virtual stand-ups for the last 2 years.
Yes, of course. So what we do is that we still have a daily stand-up. However, we don't do like how we used to do in the office. We get together, we just have regular meetings. We still try to go, following the 3 questions that we have. And because we have so many projects and we have a little bit longer than 15 minutes and not that often, because we want to make sure that we give the staff enough time to work. As for retrospective, we document everything using OneDrive. So we have a document, we're still creating a board using OneDrive. Sometimes it just Excels. And also there was time that instead of having the team, it's depending how I gauge my team going on during the past sprint. I use different techniques to do retrospective. There was several meetings I was just having like emojis to let them share how they feel about the last sprint. And then they also speak about, those emojis that they selected. So in the end, I still able to get what they really feel and thinking, the challenge they gone through, and all the successful that they, success that they complete, they made. But it doesn't have to be all text. It could be creative, but using different techniques. So that's what I've been doing for the past 2 years.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that one. So yeah, in a perfect world, you'd be standing in a room together, right? um, you know, looking at a board or just sharing out what you're talking about. But where there's a will, there's a way. There's always a way to make it work, even virtually. So just real quickly, just wanted to ask the crowd, while you're looking at this sample list of retrospective questions, do any of these stand out to you as questions you might want to use with your teams? I know I've used what do we want to start doing, stop doing, and continue doing in my meetings before. So or as Wynn said, she used emojis for like glad, sad, mad, right? Or okay, Jason in chat said he likes the 4 L's, right? What'd you like? What have you learned? What was lacking? What are you longing for? And most people will say either what, pizza, day off, right? More money. Right. Yeah. So Wynn, thanks again for sharing all of these tools that you've been using. Yep. What have I learned? That's a good question. Yeah. So great questions. Thank you for sharing those with us. Okay. So again, I shared this with you yesterday in my sessions, if you attended my sessions, but for most of our projects, we kind of use the standard 3 questions: what worked well, what can we improve? And then, as I've said this before, we talk a lot about what are we most proud of as a result of this project. And so I want to give you guys a little bit of practice using this tool. So if you click that pink Padlet link, it will take you into our Padlet. And then that's where we're going to practice just kind of doing a little sample lessons learned. So I am going to share. Let's see, I'm going to move us over here and open my Padlet. And then I'm going to share the Padlet. So just give me 1 second. There we go. So now we should be looking at my handy dandy Padlet. So show me a thumbs up if that's what you see. You see the Padlet, right? Awesome. Okay. So I would like you, we're going to do a little sample lessons learned activity. I would like you guys to do a lessons learned from this session today. So the session, the last half an hour or so you've been listening to myself and Wynn and Tyler, I'd like you guys to click the little plus sign and tell us what worked well about this session, where we can improve this session, and what are you most proud of, maybe related to your learnings around this session. So go ahead and click the plus sign and let's start filling this out. This is just a really simple example of how you can do a lessons learned using, pretty much anything. So typically we do it in a Word doc, but just for fun, we're doing it in a Padlet today. We know there are other tools you've used with your staff. You could probably even just use a chat, right? So Wynn and Tyler, go ahead and play along too if you want. And I'll also post the link in the chat just in case people with the Padlet. Yes, I agree. Clear diagrams, concise explanation, not walls of text. 100% agree. What other lessons learned? So again, cool thing, Padlet's free or very cheap. So if you're looking for kind of a more fun way to conduct lessons learned, this can be what are you most proud of? I'm going to say using a new tool for lessons learned. I'm going to add So also, guys, keep in mind the fun thing about using this is that you could add a gift. So and you can also change what color it is as well. So that's a little bit of fun for making a lessons learned a little more fun instead of just a Word doc. And I like purple, so my post is going to be purple. There we go. All right. So using it for Agile Scrum, resources that can be used for implementation, how the whole process was clear, great. Better marketing of this session, yes. Anticipating issues with vendors potentially not meeting deadlines, yes. Yeah, not asking for help or someone to collaborate. Yeah, good point. Yes, love it. See, again, this is just kind of a fun way to do a lessons learned. So there's so many ways to do a lessons learned. It does not have to be painful, does not have to be scary. I feel like when you make it a little more fun, you're actually encouraging more engagement, right? Tyler and Wynn, have you guys found that on your teams as well?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I know go ahead,
yeah,
Tyler.
I was just saying, as I mentioned, a lot of people in IT are kind of introverts, so it's tough to get people to kind of share and get excited about things. So you got to think of creative and interesting ways to collect this information, and especially the what are you most proud of, to really make them feel connected to the project.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I know Tyler's got a kind of a tough team. They've been here for a long time. They're very, hardened IT people, and so it can absolutely be hard to get them to kind of open up or yeah, to that point. We're problem solvers. As Rick said yesterday, we're always the superheroes, so we don't always give ourselves credit, for when we're doing something kind of extraordinary. So. Um, uh, I definitely think that finding creative ways to engage your staff is really important, particularly when they've been doing something for a long time. It's good to kind of be, again, that reflectiveness. We're always jumping from project to project, so just taking that. I mean, what does this take? 20 minutes, 30 minutes? Wynn, how long are your retros?
Normally an hour.
Okay, so an hour even to just think back on what did we do well, what do we want to improve, what are we going to take into our next project, and even the repeatable projects, right? So Tyler, you guys are issuing new devices just constantly, right? So it's kind
Yep,
of the work, but it's also individual projects each time, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So it's helpful to kind of look at each time and go, what worked well and what can we do better next time, right? I think I was asking Tyler, I think, how many devices have you issued this year alone? Like over 600 or something like that?
Yeah, we're up to like 800 at this point.
Yeah, so new laptops, new monitors, all this stuff. And so, again, there's always opportunities to make it better and do it better the next time. So, again, just another fun way to do it. Looks like we have a question. Melissa, do you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, hi, good morning. I have a question. So lessons learned kind of as presented, I've kind of assumed was more the project team, more internal. I'm wondering if there are strategies or concerns associated with doing lessons learned broader than the internal project team, or if you had any experience with that. Sharing lessons learned with like your steering committee or your sponsor or vendors, et cetera, and what that might look like.
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm going to switch us back to our PowerPoint, although the Padlet was very fun. You guys, thank you for playing. That was super fun. I'm going to take us back to our slide here. And yeah, so I have done lessons learned. I have included vendors. That's been not a problem because if we're doing a project, for example, we implemented PeopleSoft budgeting and cloud services. And so we had a fabulous vendor we were working with. And so we 100% collaborated with her and her team in our lessons learned because we wanted feedback from both sides. We also considered or included our district extended team. So not only did we have our core team of SDCUE staff, but we also had 27 districts that were involved. And so we had the district core team members involved with that lessons learned as well to figure out how we could engage them better as well. I haven't done lessons learned with the broader audience. Reason being is it's kind of hard to do to set the right tone if you have like a huge audience, right? So for getting feedback from the broader audience, I've tended to use surveys to get more of that feedback. But you absolutely could, as long as you can make sure, again, you're setting that right tone where it's meant to be a learning experience. It's meant to be forwarding, and in the spirit of continuous improvement. So I think as long as you could keep that tone, you could do it with anyone. I would just be careful that it doesn't turn into a complaint session, right? Because just when you think lessons learned, like before I started doing this work heavily, when I thought lessons learned, I thought, oh, that's just somewhat an opportunity for people to come in and complain. And really, that's not the intention, right? The purpose is to gather information that we can use to make our processes better the next time. So hope that answers your question. Tyler and Wynn, did you guys want to comment on that as well?
I had something similar where I didn't invite them to the actual lessons learned meeting, but we had a survey sent out after our first phase to get the stakeholders' opinion on what they felt worked well and what can be improved on. And since we're kind of handling in a phase approach, we're able to apply it to our lessons learned and kind of react to that for the next phase. So we have done that. We have had vendors included just to find out on their end what worked and what we can do better to get them more integrated with the project or make sure that we're hitting our timelines and deadlines and everything like that. We haven't taken anything to the steering committee or to the sponsor. We usually save that for kind of the final report that goes up to them and the sign off for them. But that is kind of a good suggestion, is to get them included beforehand so that they can kind of provide their insight before we kind of close up the entire project.
Yeah, great question. Go ahead.
Do you present your kind of highlights or analysis of your lessons learned in your final report that then is potentially like your presentation to?
Yeah, absolutely. So we take both the survey data as well as the lessons learned data. And again, the what people write, it's just data, right? It's our job to do that analysis and make sense of it in a way that's going to be helpful to our project team, our sponsors, et cetera. So it's looking through that data to identify categories or broad areas and kind of hone that information to then oftentimes we'll like, okay, if you had a huge project team and you've got a lot of lessons learned, you're not going to just laundry list all of that for your sponsors. You want to kind of cherry pick maybe both good and bad things, or things that really worked well and things we want to do better next time. Or there might be a lot of comments around specific categories that you might pull out, like, oh, there was a lot of comments around testing. We needed more time for testing or more staff for testing or that kind of thing. So again, it's a great lesson to take into your project sponsor to say, hey, remember on that last project, we squished our testing time and that really hurt us. So as we're writing the next charter for the next project, we really need to make sure we're building in that testing time or training time or whatever it is, or we need a better handoff with our support team to make sure that they're well equipped to, support the product once we go live. So survey data and those lessons learned data are great data to share with whoever's going to be helping make decisions for future projects. Yeah. Leon, did you have a comment or question?
I do, both a comment and a question. I just in the context that we do work in my department, we work on different projects and things work concurrently, and we're constantly doing everything full speed. So trying to figure out a time to dedicate towards this conversation is difficult when you're constantly bombarded with work, right? Which is why it doesn't happen enough. I do find, well, one of my questions is going to be how you guys address that particular issue in itself. But then also, I had a comment about how these conversations, these discussions can actually turn into best practices that you can use as, for your organization. Um, but some of our conversations are more geared towards a particular project. Another one, discussion can actually be more of a broader best practice, just in general, how to do things better. So I just wanted to kind of discuss that and say, that the conversation could turn into a document of sorts that lists best practices organizationally, as well as I also had the question I mentioned about how you prioritize that. I'm so sorry for the word salad. I hope you
That's
caught that.
okay. Yeah, yeah. To answer the question I heard in there, which is like, how do you make time for it? You have to actually build it into your project schedule. So we build in several weeks of closure at the end of every project in order to conduct the survey, conduct the lessons learned, do the final report, even do the celebration, right? Because I guarantee you, people have said, "Oh, we don't have time to celebrate," right? We got to move on to the next thing. Again, conducting the lessons learned, like doing that, just I can do a 30-minute lessons learned meeting, right? It doesn't have to be a huge endeavor, but it's just building in, getting it on the schedule, um, getting the process, keeping the process pretty simple so it's not an overwhelming task. And then giving yourself a little bit of time to kind of go through and analyze what data you got out of that. But building in that time to make sure you're collecting that information. So literally you build it into your project schedules is kind of the short answer. So as you're building out your charter, as you're building out your project plan, give yourself Candace, on average, what do we do? 2-3 weeks, even a month of closure?
Yeah, pretty much. At least 2 weeks.
So anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks to close out your projects. So that gives you the time to do all of those closure tasks. And then it just becomes habit, right? So you'll train your teams, you'll train your sponsors that this is just how we do the work, right? It's not we went go live and now we're starting the next project. No, it's go live, some closure activities, then we start the next project. So hope that answers your question. I don't know if there was more to it, but
No, that was perfect. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Melissa, yeah.
I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Leon said about sometimes there are things that rise to the top as a lessons learned. We're like, wow, this really worked and we could use this in other projects that the people that are on that necessary project, right, they might not see the lessons learned that goes in the repository. How do you gather some of those kinds of big highlights and lessons learned that you might just be picking up throughout the project and share that organization wide?
Great
Or
question.
team wide, or
Or team wide, yeah,
like
yeah.
what you guys are doing over these last 2 days, right? Like how do
Right.
you capture all of those really good tips so that somebody else doesn't have to find that, right? They can just replicate that and do that with what they're doing concurrently with their other 57 projects.
Yeah, that is the challenge. Honestly, like we're all doing way too much. I don't know, especially I feel like during the pandemic, like working from home has not been like, oh, we're sitting back eating bonbons. I feel like we've been doing more projects in the last 2 years. Tyler and Wynn, you guys agree? Like we've been slammed this whole time. Like we've not been sitting back. So yeah, it can be very difficult. Again, like you guys said, you got so many things going on concurrently. I cannot say that we've solved that issue, to be honest, Melissa. Like we collect a lot of lessons learned, we share the reports, we try to share the information broadly with our leadership team, at least in our division. So oftentimes, the way we do it in our organization is during both early on in the project, kind of in kickoff, and then even at the end when we're kind of doing final sign off with our sponsors, members of our project teams will often go present to our ITS leadership team. So Terry and his leadership team. So we'll share a lot of those best practices with our leadership team. So for example, we're in EPMO under Perry. Win is in our EA division, our enterprise applications under Becky Benson. Tyler is in our support services team under, excuse me, spit it out.
John
John.
Valancourt.
John
John
Valancourt. Yes,
Valancourt.
I'm like, not John Cusack, John Valancourt. Too many
A lot of
Johns
Johns
in
in
our
our
division.
division.
Yes, a lot of Johns. Anyway, so that way, if they all get to hear, so if I'm sharing lessons learned from my recruiting project that's under PeopleSoft, John and other division leaders get to hear that message, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to say it's going to guarantee that they're going to carry that into their next project, but at least we're kind of sharing those best practices that we've identified. So I guess my best advice to that would be find ways to kind of keep it alive. Like maybe when you're planning your next project charter, you actually take the time to go back and look at the lessons learned from the last one, or maybe you identify a project best practices document that you refer to that you keep adding to every time you do a project, and there's a lessons learned you want to take into every project. Maybe that's sort of your guiding your North Star, your guiding light as you look at as you go into your next projects. So I think it depends on your team and your structure, but I think there's lots of cool ideas out there. Everybody else on the call, what are your thoughts? How do you think? That's a great ending question. So either feel free to raise your hand or put in the chat. How would you keep those best practices going and shared amongst your teams? Because that's a great question.
Yeah, I love that like living document idea, because sometimes they don't build that into the project charter, is to take the time to go back and review and analyze the previous lessons learned, and to pull out what will apply to all projects and what was specific to just that project. And that's what I mentioned in my slides, that sometimes what worked, what didn't work, what are we proud of, it's not going to apply to everything. We have so many different projects that we work on one after another, so it's best to just kind of analyze it, say, you know what, this is going to work for everything. This type of early communication for all of our projects, this type of splitting up the project in this way or that way, and then just creating that living document, just sharing it with all of your division and allowing them to use it and add to it as the projects go along.
Yeah, really, until those best practices just become sort of your modus operandi, how you normally operate, right? All right, Roy, do you want to close this out? Because we're 2 minutes over, so.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So I just wanted to share that in my previous life, the lessons learned were used to adjust our charters. And we felt like, oh, you know what? We need to add an assumption section, because that was always overlooked. And so we use like lessons learned to adjust even our charter. So there's a lot of things that can come out from lessons learned. So that's all I wanted to share. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great point. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you being here with us today. Again, the presentation is on that presentation page if you want to download it, and this recording will be available in a couple of weeks. If you have any other questions, please feel free to put them into that main questions Padlet, and we'll be happy to take a look and address those for you guys. But again, kind of one of the benefits of a small group is we were able to kind of have this fun, intimate conversation. So really appreciate that. A lot easier than having 200 people in my session. So thank you all, and we'll see you later today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.